His oldest victim was 21, the youngest just 9 years old.
Strangely, she fought like hell. I mean, just wouldn't go along with anything. And she fought and fought. And I don't recall what type of cord or strand or piece of wire or something.
To the rest of the world, he was Tony the telephone guy, married with 2 daughters, a regular Joe.
Shore was a telephone lineman. He had access to every neighborhood in Houston. He had a reason to be there. He had a marked vehicle. It made it totally easy for him to just look for victims.
To the detectives investigating his crimes, he was a twisted serial murderer. He had a grim nickname too, the Tourniquet Killer.
Did you strangle her? I want to say a nylon ligature, some piece of wood or something that twisted it. Is a, I don't know, what's the word, tourniquet maybe, or? Yeah, something. You put it in there and then twist it.
He would strike 4 times, maybe more.
Anthony Shore's the worst of the worst. Serial murderer, torturer, enjoyer of other people's pain and suffering, murderer of little children and women, the kind of guy who we can never be safe enough from.
Tony the telephone guy, Mr. Dependable when the line went down, and as he drove around Houston's neighborhoods, a man made for murder. What made Anthony Shore the man he became? A serial killer executed after murdering 4 young women. Using expert digital imagery to show the different faces of an emerging killer, this series reveals the timelines and red flags of those who will one day be investigated for murder. Red flags for Anthony Shore, which began early.
We could see that from when Anthony was a child, from the torturing and killing of innocent animals to putting a screwdriver through his sister's head. So sadly, it's no surprise that he would definitely abuse his own family members as well.
September 26, 1986. For 14-year-old Laurie Tremblay, it's a perfectly normal day.
Laurie was walking to school, doing what thousands and millions of youngsters do every day. And here comes this predator.
One morning, this girl comes up and asks me for a cigarette while I was at the stoplight. I asked if she needed a ride, and I gave her a ride. And a couple days went by. She saw me. I gave her a ride again to school.
14 years old. Laurie's 14 years old. I mean, think about, your children who are 14 years old. I mean, it's unfathomable what happened to her.
What happened was that she had the misfortune to be hunted by Anthony Shore.
She and I became more than friends. She and I became involved just in the sense of kissing and, hello, goodbyes. I started giving her a ride on a semi-regular basis. And one day it was misting rain. She saw me and asked me for a ride. And I wanted to get more involved in just the kissing and stuff. And it started off okay. And I undid her bra. She freaked out and said, no, this ain't going anywhere. Let me out, threatened to tell on me, but she wouldn't calm down. I remember trying to knock her out. I hit her in the back of the head.
Shore must have felt that he'd gone too far to go back.
I took this cotton cord and I tried to make sure that she would never ever tell anybody. Even though I knew that was insane, I strangled her. I panicked. Daylight came on and I didn't know what to do. I mean, there was no way to make this go away. I stepped over the line.
Shore had not been spotted and there was nothing to link him to the murder. Laurie, strangled with a rope, had become the first victim of a man who would go on to become a serial killer.
Anthony Shore, from my perspective, after being in the criminal justice system for over 30 years, is probably one of the nation's most cold-blooded, diabolical, notorious serial killers in his country's history.
His career had only just begun.
When I worked on those cases as a young prosecutor, looking for a serial murder was like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Already a killer by the age of 24, the roots of Shore's vicious attacks lay much further back in a childhood sullied by unusual horrors. No animal was safe with him around. Dr. Judy Ho is a forensic psychologist who's been researching Anthony Shore's timeline.
One of the biggest red flags for an eventual antisocial personality disorder, or what people colloquially know as psychopaths, is that they torture animals at a young age. And it's just the visual of it, that an innocent little child might torture an innocent, cute, cuddly little animal, and yet this is exactly what Anthony does.
Around the age of 5, Shore stabbed a kitten to death.
It shows a level of lack of empathy, lack of emotionality, and just something that can't simply be learned from your social environment typically. You know, nobody at the age of 4 or 5 typically has that many other friends who are doing the same thing, torturing animals and killing them. And so it shows that there might be a genetic predisposition here towards doing evil acts.
There was worse still to come when he attacked one of his sisters.
By the time he was an elementary school kid and he was trying to drive a screwdriver through his sister's head, I think sadly, he was kind of marked for evil in many ways, because at that young age, you just don't see that kind of behavior very often. I think when somebody shows the propensity to do something so violent to a family member that early, I think that shows that we're dealing with somebody very different here than just a typical person who grew up in an abusive environment and learned bad behaviors. This is not just learned, this is something that is built in.
Growing up, he would get his sisters to procure their friends so that he could touch them inappropriately, forcing himself upon them.
He was a groper. Sometimes it could start off as simple as somebody in an elevator and they like the fact that they can bump up against a stranger and get away with it. Anthony was that kind of person. He would bump up against people, he would grope people and see how he could get away with it. And then he would graduate because that no longer was satisfying to him.
He had been clearly manipulating and deceiving people from the time he was a child. And this really, he got quite good at it by the time he was a teenager. And I think he instilled fear in his own sisters. And I think there was a part of his sisters that probably feared for themselves.
Groping girls and terrorizing his sisters was just the start for Anthony Shore.
He was clearly a master in the art of manipulation, and he didn't care who he hurt along the way.
Psychologists talk of learned behavior. Already a kill to his name, was Shore equipped to kill again and again?
Throughout the years, Anthony Shore learned from his mistakes and kept on trying to protect his craft.
I don't think that there was going to be a path off of this.
The murder of Laurie Tremblay was not enough for Anthony Shore.
A typical criminal, they'll start out, once they're successful, the very first time that they're successful, they will continue to do the crime the same way.
Driven by sexual desire, Shore was likely to kill again. The only question was when.
It was sexual deviance had something to do with it. More, I think, in retrospect, it was having to do with the possession of a person, making them do things.
In 1992, nearly 6 years since his first murder, Shore gets married, and soon after, 2 young daughters follow. Was this his way of designing a perfect front for homicide?
I do have to wonder about the true nature of that relationship. Did he really get married because he had genuine affection for this person, or was she basically used as a pawn in his game? The fact that he had a wife and children would make it easier for him to commit crimes and escape unnoticed.
Anthony Shore was living a normal life in Harris County, Houston, working as a phone repairman. Was a man made to murder about to strike again? If so, he had the perfect cover with a job almost designed for a predatory killer.
Shore was a telephone lineman. He had access to every neighborhood in Houston. He had a reason to be there. He had a marked vehicle. It made it totally easy for him to just look for victims.
He knew how to blend into neighborhoods. It would not be uncommon to see a telephone truck or a blue-collar type worker in many of the neighborhoods and communities where he would select his victims from.
That's how serial killers operate. They blend in, so they remain anonymous.
That was always the plan of Anthony Shaw, which he would one day confirm to interrogators.
I had a wife, I had 2 daughters, living in this reasonably decent house. It was in a nice neighborhood and all this stuff, and I had a life, and I just couldn't see it all thrown away.
Shaw even had a hobby to complete the killer's social camouflage.
In addition to Shaw working at a regular job during the day, I mean, in the evening, it's my understanding he performed. He was at least a self-described, child prodigy of the arts, and particularly the piano itself.
Serial killers also tend to be very smart, almost sociopathic. Sociopaths can also be very charming. And when somebody is charming, people like them. They have relationships, they build families and friends, and so therefore, people aren't going to question them.
That's part of the facade that they try to maintain. That's kind of like their Jekyll and Hyde ego that they like to have. Is there some sort of normalcy where no one suspects anything?
All part of being made for murder.
It's very interesting when we see psychopaths have these pro-socially encouraged relationships, such as marriage and having a family. In many ways, it's a cover for all of the other bad things that they're going to do, because maybe you wouldn't suspect a family man that seemed happy in his marriage and in his family life.
Unsuspected of the murder of Laurie Tremblay, Shaw could again sharpen his predatory instincts.
Serial killers have a desire to kill. They have a thirst to kill. And so the average serial killer could be your postman, could be your doctor, could be in this case, the telephone man.
Troubled by an injury to his hand that he had sustained when he killed Laurie, Shaw changes his MO.
He realized that his finger got hurt. When he was trying to strangle her, his finger got hurt. And so it was a learned behavior. He said, you know what, next time, I'm not going to have my finger in that position where it can hurt. It can leave too much evidence. I could bleed. That could possibly lead to me being caught. So what does he do? Gets a tourniquet.
His second victim is 21-year-old Maria del Carmen Estrada.
Ran across this really a beautiful young lady, and I offered her a ride, and she turned me down. But she was on my way to work every morning.
Here she was again, vulnerable, by herself, no one else around. And here comes Anthony Shaw again, seizing that opportunity.
When he picked his victims, you will notice that they were all of the same kind of size, all looked relatively young, all with the dark hair, primarily that very Hispanic look to them.
She told me her name was Carmen, and she didn't take bites from strangers, and she didn't speak in English. And one morning it was light, misty rain, and she took a ride. And like the first time, after that, there were other occasions I gave her a ride. It was going places. She was talking about, yeah, she wanted to go out.
I believe that in his own mind, Anthony Shaw, for whatever reason, really had an affinity for Carmen. And if you look at some of the serial killers that are out there, there's always tends to be one victim that they can associate with, that they believe is theirs and that can understand them the most. So perhaps Carmen was his pet, Carmen was his prize, and he liked Carmen.
He may have liked her, but that fact offered Carmen no protection. He also took the chance to claim his name. It was now that the so-called Tourniquet Killer was born.
One morning we just, again, things got out of hand. We pulled in behind the Dairy Queen, and it was going okay. She was amenable to a kiss, and then I pushed her further.
The most personal way to kill somebody is to strangle them. And in Anthony's case, not only did he choose strangulation, but he has this tourniquet that can give life or take life, and it was personal and close. And so he was able to watch and literally watch the breath of life come out of that person.
The tourniquet is a signature for Anthony Shore, and it, to me, distinguished him from other individuals who kill people with their bare hands. The tourniquet takes your fingers off the pulse, literally, but it gave Shore the ability to turn life on and off by controlling the airflow of the victim. And it heightens the anxiety and pain and fear of the suffering victim.
I remember I opened her glass and she was resisting it. So then I had this sick consumption, not like voices in my head, but just driven that I was going to have her regardless. My intention was to have sex with her, and that wasn't happening. She became real violent, just fighting, wanting to get out of the car.
I think in Anthony Shore's mind, he was probably thinking, what can I do to achieve that level of notoriety? What will separate me from these other serial killers that no one else has done? Aha, I can strangle my victims to death with a handmade tourniquet.
He seemed to take pride, a sick kind of pride in his killing and in his technique with the tourniquet. It worked for him. It was his signature.
I got a little paranoid because now this wasn't a consensual thing. I didn't set out to kill her. That was not my intent. But it got out of hand. I didn't have sex with her, as it turns out, but I tried to. It wasn't going to happen. I remember I had a pair of shears, and she had on black shorts. I took them off. And her pantyhose, but I didn't cut her panties. I don't know why.
Instead, he reached for something he'd kept in his van and for a small section of rope.
It was something. Might have been a paintbrush, something. Some piece of wood or something. They twisted it. Used as a, I don't know, what's the word, a tourniquet maybe? Or yeah, something. You put it in there and then twist it. Yeah.
Anthony Shore had found his perfect method for killing.
He got the thrill from watching his victims die. He had the control. He was, in his mind, godlike. He could grant life or grant death.
Shore dumps Carmen's body at the fast food drive-thru, coincidentally, the same one used by the local district attorney.
The Dairy Queen, where Carmen's body was found, was our Dairy Queen in the neighborhood. And so when that case came across my desk, I couldn't help but notice that.
But still, there's nothing to link the regular telephone guy with her murder. Just 18 months later, in 1992, the urge for violence strikes again.
I can't imagine this being spontaneous. I mean, to me, this is so methodically calculated on his part as to how he picked his victims, and then, of course, what he did to his victims afterward. This was not some spontaneous spur of the moment. This was somebody who was so devious and so cunning in nature that his thought process started from how to abduct, how to sexually torture, how to kill, how to dispose.
After stalking the streets, he selects another victim, 14-year-old Selma Jansko.
She was young, she was attractive. She was a latchkey kid coming home from high school or whatever school she was going to. I had broken into the house, which wasn't easy. The door was unlocked, and I waited for her to get there, and she got there.
This time, he tells himself things will be different, but can he control his destructive urges?
And I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't have to take a life. I promised myself that I wasn't going to take any more lives, no matter what.
Shore, in the taped interrogations, which would later surface, insists that the fate of this next victim was in the balance. If he could rape but not kill her, then she would be spared. For analysts, that should not detract from the assessment of how bad he was.
Sometimes we do see, on very rare occasions, somebody who truly feels like they are born evil, and I believe that that's Anthony.
Apparently determined not to kill this victim, Shaw takes a different approach to his method of attack.
Told her it was a burglary, got her cooperation, and tied her up with electrical cord and raped her.
The old familiar urges kick in. The young woman's life was in the balance.
The resistance and the violence got out of hand. I thought that I was going to do this again. She started fighting, and she started just going berserk.
Shaw manages to pull himself back from the final twist of the tourniquet. His latest victim was to survive.
I had to make a decision. Once again, I freaked. I started to strangle her, and I thought, no, I just can't. I just need to get the fuck out of here. And I left. Thank God.
But you didn't strangle her at all, or you started to?
I started to, and I stopped.
He considered it an accomplishment to be able to rape women without murdering them.
Was his change of behavior temporary? With 2 murders under his belt and still not on the police radar, Shaw may have believed he'd become unstoppable. Judy Ho thinks him programmed to kill.
I think that there was a couple of components to this. One is very poor impulse control, so he just did whatever he felt like. But the other piece of it is that he probably derived some kind of sick joy from dominating people who were vulnerable.
But could he continue his reign of terror without being caught? No woman was safe until Anthony Shaw was behind bars.
These were people's children, daughters. They're real people. His crimes were calculated. He planned and premeditated all of them. It was just a question of who was going to be his next victim. I felt like it was only a matter of time before the next body would show up.
He had been bad from birth. As a boy, he had tortured animals, sexually abused his sisters and their friends. By his 30s, he had raped 3 times and killed 2 young women. Within months of his latest attack on Selmayanska, serial killer Anthony Shaw is on the hunt for new prey.
Anthony Shaw picked his victims because they were vulnerable.
It just made them such easy prey for a guy like Shaw, whose heart was set on evil and whose pleasure was derived from other people's pain.
He's not picking on people who were his own size. And so he's always looking for victims that he would clearly be declared the winner. It was rigged from the start.
These young women and little girls were totally vulnerable. They were young, they were female, and they were forcibly kidnapped. They were raped, they were tortured to death.
And none was more vulnerable than 9-year-old Diana Rebola, snatched in broad daylight off the streets, less than a block from her home.
The unique thing about the city of Houston is there's a lot of small towns inside the big city. And this particular neighborhood is just that. It's a small town. The mom sends her to the store. It's just down the block. It's not very far. And lo and behold, there's a predator in the midst, being Anthony Shaw.
In the back of his innocent-looking phone company truck, Shaw sexually assaults her and strangles her using a tourniquet.
I knew I couldn't just let her go because I knew that, obviously she's going to go tell, and once again, my life would be all fucked up.
When you talk about a 9-year-old girl, it's always the children that haunt you the most.
Strangely, she fought like hell. I mean, just wouldn't go along with anything. She fought and fought. And I don't recall what type of cord or strand or piece of wire or something. And I did the same thing.
She was sexually tortured and just dumped like the rest of them.
By now, police were warning the public about the Tourniquet Killer.
That's his personal touch. You gotta, if you go back and look at serial killers, everybody has a catchy nickname, a phrase that we give them.
And it becomes his signature card, his calling card, and he gets good at it.
He just did whatever he felt like. But the other piece of it is that he probably derived some kind of sick joy from dominating people who were vulnerable. Notice that he doesn't necessarily dominate people who were his size.
In interrogations with police, Shaw seems to accept that the murder of a 9-year-old girl is beyond even his behavioral standards.
Every time I tell myself, I just kept saying, this gotta stop. I'm a sick puppy.
She's 9 years old, for God's sake. I mean, it's just unconscionable that someone can do this to a 9-year-old in the middle of the day. We're not talking about someone walking, in the dark, after hours. We're talking about the middle of the day in a neighborhood. That's pretty brazen.
Even the worst, the dregs of society, the worst criminals out there, that there is no mercy for somebody who could take the life of a child for their own sexual pleasure, for their own pleasure. Perhaps this is one of those cases that even the devil himself wouldn't want Anthony Shaw.
Had Anthony Shaw reached the depths of his depravity? Or was he simply made to kill and kill again?
I don't think there was a limit, because we could see that from when Anthony was a child, from the torturing and killing of innocent animals to putting a screwdriver through his sister's head.
Still, the killing continued. Shaw's fourth victim, in July 1995, was 16-year-old Donna Sanchez. She fitted his preferred profile, Hispanic-looking, from a less affluent part of town, a single girl, vulnerable on the streets.
The neighborhoods in Houston were changing in the late 80s and 90s. And part of it was we had an immigrant population, very low on the socioeconomic scale, many of them not citizens of the country. And so that created an opportunity for a serial killer who was looking for people who he could grab, rape, kill, and who might not be missed.
Again, 16-year-old teenager. Middle of the day, minding her own business, not doing anything wrong, not doing anything illegal, just doing what teenage girls do.
Dana goes to make a phone call. In the days of telephone booths, she's just gonna make a phone call. What a perfect victim for Anthony Shaw. He's the phone man.
I was driving around and I saw this girl. She had this look that she was angry and upset, and she was at a payphone. She started storming off, and I was making the corner. I just said, hey, would you like a ride?
She's seen certainly repairman. This guy's doesn't look like much of a threat. I mean, my goodness, he must be at work. So she's very trusting. And that's one thing Anthony Shaw made note of, that all the victims were very trusting, and Dana trusted him for a ride.
No problem. You jump right in. Only one driving. And she was, when we had conversation, and I had this same sick fantasy crap going through my mind, like there could be something, relationship there, or some type of thing between us, and I was flirting with her heavily. That time I had really long hair. I thought I looked good, maybe I just looked like a freak, I don't know. But she was real friendly, talking about, I think she said she was a runaway.
Donna had no apparent cause to fear the friendly phone guy, but for some reason she was cautious.
And she told me her name was Ruby. Why she told me that, I don't know.
Donna's willingness to make conversation would convince Anthony Shaw that he could do what he wanted with her.
I thought, hell, I'm gonna go for it. It's Florence parking lot. And I started flirting with her and petting on her, and she was joking like, no, I got a boyfriend and this and that. So I grabbed her, pulled her into the back of the van, and then she fought. She bit me hard, drew blood.
Shaw reverted to his usual methods.
So I restrained her, tied her hands.
With what?
I want to say duct tape. I don't remember for sure, but I think duct tape. I remember that I taped her.
Right.
face. And she was fighting so hard. And once again, I knew that I couldn't stop. I knew there was nothing I could do to get out of this.
Did you use any kind of tourniquet on her, Tony? I mean, something?
Same thing. I pulled her out into a field and left like a bat out of hell, scared to death.
Anthony Shaw had struck again. What would it take to stop a natural-born killer?
There's a phone call, a tip.
Someone knows something and is willing to talk.
Do you know how her body got found?
Yes, I do.
What?
An anonymous phone call.
And who made that phone call?
I did.
Incredibly, Shaw had called the media with a tip-off about himself.
He certainly wanted credit, wanted to be known. So he has the audacity to contact a local news station and tip them off as to where the body could be found, just so he can make sure that he got credit for the latest murder in his own mind.
Despite the tip-off, it took Shaw's own family to give him away.
And there was a part of me that just wanted to be caught and stopped.
After 15 years, police hadn't caught the so-called Tourniquet Killer.
Still, there wasn't anything to link him with the murders.
Then Anthony Shaw made the fatal error of sexually abusing his own daughters.
Sadly, it's no surprise that he would definitely abuse his own family members as well.
They told police that their father had drugged them and molested them. His wife said that he had drugged and raped her, choked her while having sex, used drugs, and kept pornography of young girls.
What Anthony Shaw did to his family was, even in some ways, more despicable because you're doing it to your family members. What he did to his wife, and of course what he did to his two daughters, who in a very strange, cathartic way ended up solving the mystery of the murders.
Believing the molestation to be his first offense, the judge dealt leniently with him. He was released on probation, but there was a catch.
Anthony Shaw was a sex offender, and because he was a sex offender, he had to give the state a sample of his DNA.
Something that had been impossible at the time of the murders.
As a young line prosecutor, I worked in the Special Crimes Division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, which I now lead. There was no general testing of DNA.
So in 1986, nobody knew of DNA. We started videotaping crime scenes and we knew how to lift fingerprints. And lifting fingerprints went back decades. But there was no new law enforcement technology yet. These detectives had the foresight to collect and preserve that evidence.
The arrest of Anthony Shaw came because records were kept and advances were made in science.
They were able to extract DNA from Maria Estrada's fingernails.
Anthony Shaw's own DNA finally caught up to him.
In almost a strange, cathartic way, his daughters ends up solving the murders of the 4 young girls, because if he hadn't committed those atrocities, the abuses on his daughter, who knows if it would ever have been solved.
When detectives pulled him in, Shaw was at first unwilling to talk, but 11 hours into the interrogation, he confesses to the 4 murders and an assault.
It's not an interrogation that you hear, it's a conversation. It's a conversation of Anthony Shaw sharing with the detective the horrible evil that he has done.
I just knew that I couldn't get caught.
At his trial in 2004, Shaw was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death.
If you're not going to give the death penalty in this case, there's no reason to have a death penalty.
When I became the Harris County District Attorney, and it became my duty to schedule executions of people who had already received the death penalty, Shaw's name was on the list.
In fact, he begged to be executed.
He wasn't going to get any attention if he didn't get the death penalty. If he got life, and we didn't have life without parole back then, again, I don't think he would have achieved that level of notoriety that he so desperately wanted. He had to have the death penalty to feed his own ego.
Held for 13 years, when the date finally arrived, he had one last cruel blow to inflict on his victims' families. Even on death row, Shaw still playing games.
Only when it became a reality, when an execution date that looked pretty much set in stone was going to happen, all of a sudden, again, the floodgates open up by Anthony Allen Shaw, but again, self-serving, strictly to save his own neck.
Just hours before his life was due to end, Anthony Shaw claims to have committed multiple other attacks.
You know, we were expecting him to confess to other murders of other young girls, probably from Alaska to Maine. Any unsay he was going to confess to. We were expecting that.
The execution was stayed while the authorities investigated.
When the government exercises the greatest power it has, which is to kill a citizen, it always has to be taken with great care. It's the most serious act our government commits.
He got a 90-day reprieve in order to look at all the, quote, offenses he was claiming credit to, just to make sure and determine that he indeed didn't commit any further murders and rapes. And so all of a sudden, everything stops for families who had prepped for years for this day.
But was Shaw telling the truth to clear his conscience, or was it one simple final power game?
Shaw is not the typical low-functioning, one bad crime defendant. He was a calculated, thinking, predatory killer. Whether he was showboating at the time of his execution, I can't say. I don't know what his motive was, but he acted as though he wanted to clear his conscience.
It was so calculated to me, again, by his narcissistic ego, on how he continued to seek attention. And again, it's all about him. Always has been, always will be.
It's hard to know what to believe from a serial killer, but it's easy to imagine other victims because Shaw was prolific, but he was calculated.
Anthony Shaw is about as smart as a serial killer is as I've seen in 30+ years of criminal justice. You hate to say he is diabolically brilliant. He played his hand like an ace poker player, and he waited right into that exact moment when he knew he could throw those cards in and cash in, and he did it. Basically, Shaw bought himself 90 days worth of life.
The authorities find no evidence backing up his new confession.
It's hard to imagine somebody who tortured these women and sexually exploited and enjoyed their pain and suffering to his benefit to know what to believe.
Nothing's been factually proven on any claim he has made since he has been on death row. I'm not going to even give him the satisfaction of even, pretending that he actually committed any more sexual assaults.
With nothing now standing in the way of his execution, Shaw was finally given a lethal injection in January 2018.
I don't think we're ever going to know what was going through Anthony Shaw's mind at the time of his death, but I don't see how it couldn't have been the faces of his victims.
You have to look at his victims. These were 4 young girls from the ages of 9 to 21, not doing anything wrong. One is buying groceries for her mother, just walking home. And then the way he would kill his victims, that has to, using a tourniquet is so personal and such a slow, agonizing form of death. It's just unimaginable and unspeakable what these young women had to undergo before they were finally killed by Shaw.
The people whose children and family members were murdered are broken from the crimes of Anthony Shaw. And there's really nothing that we in the system can do to fix what happened to them. But I do believe that by finishing the case and asking that the sentence be carried out, that at least they can move on.
It was justice of a kind for the victims' still grieving families.
There are certain cases that haunt me to this day, and I vividly will never forget Anthony Allen Shore.
Anthony Shore's the worst of the worst. Serial murderer, torturer, enjoyer of other people's pain and suffering, murderer of little children and women, the kind of guy who we can never be safe enough from.
His own sisters and estranged daughters welcomed the sentence on Anthony Shore, a man made for murder.
I think unless he had multiple positive influences throughout his life there to catch him at his every evil act, to turn him around right then and there, and to continue to be incessant in their quest to try to change the behaviors of this young man, I don't think that there was going to be a path off of this.
I don't think he was a redeemable person. I thought that we would always be in danger from Anthony Shore. And taking a look at his victims' families in the waiting room with them before the execution, these were broken people. And I think the future dangerousness is that every breath that man took caused those families pain, including his own family, who testified and told the media they wanted him dead.
I think that by the time he was an elementary school kid and he was trying to drive a screwdriver through his sister's head, I think sadly, he was kind of marked for evil in many ways, because at that young age, you just don't see that kind of behavior very often. And unless he was in therapy throughout his entire life and he had only positive role models, I think there might have been a small chance, but who's gonna be there in all the moments of his life? And there may be so many other evil and bad things that he did that nobody will ever know about. And I think that's the problem. And sometimes we do see on very rare occasions somebody who truly feels like they are born evil, and I believe that that's Anthony.